Did Oda inspire the DressrOZa storyline off of The Wizard of Oz, basing many of the main characters off of the characters from that book, along with a lot of the plot elements inside the arc itself? Just wanted to make a quick little announcement for the actual video. Since the Vegapunk video has been absolutely blowing up, I decided to make a sub goal, 10,000 subs and I get a One Piece tattoo. If you're interested, subscribe, let's get into this. The Wizard of Oz is the most iconic fairy tale of the modern era, and personally, I was very surprised that it was not referenced whatsoever in Whole Cake Island, an arc basically completely inspired by fairy tales. However, when I remembered the Emerald City was mentioned all the way back in Jaya, and then we saw Greenbit, the wheels started turning. DressrOZa itself could be completely interpreted as a Wizard of Oz type story. In this video, I'm going to be talking about how many of the main characters introduced in the DressrOZa arc are emblematic of the characters from the Wizard of Oz, including their actual goals, how they achieve their goals, and the way the setting of DressrOZa itself is similar to the world of Oz. It's something I've been thinking about for a while, so I just wanted to talk about it because I think it's pretty cool, and the comparisons are actually pretty interesting in my opinion. So there are 5 major characters I'm going to be talking about through this video: Dorothy, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, the Cowardly Lion, and the Wizard of Oz. However, I'm also going to be implementing elements from other major characters in the story, like the Wicked Witch of the West, but seeing that this is DressrOZa we're talking about, we can already assume who this Wicked Witch character is going to be based off of. So let's start this off with a character that I think represents Dorothy the most throughout DressrOZa, which might be obvious since this character has the strongest relations to the most characters and the strongest emotional weight in the arc, Rebecca. Now, before you get your torches and pitchforks talking about how Rebecca's a trash character, her design sucks, and the flashback was played too much, I get it. But personally, I think she's pretty cool. I'd give her like a B tier. She's cool. She does have terrible fashion sense, but I think that her character is actually very well written and that many people sleep on analyzing her because of all the negativity surrounding her in DressrOZa. But putting aside all the manga versus anime differences, let's get right into what I think makes her character similar to Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Rebecca's goal at the start of the story is to get the Mera Mera no Mi, defeat Doflamingo, and live with the toy soldier that raised her. And Dorothy's goal is to defeat the Wicked Witch of the West and get back to her home. So already these characters have the exact same motivation, being able to return to life with their loved ones. Now let's go back to that point I made about Dorothy and Rebecca getting the most bonds in their respective storylines. Dorothy is the literal main character. She constantly brings all these new people on her journey, hoping that they can also get something from the wizard. And Rebecca is the person that convinces Luffy to help this entire country because she's the one that gave him food. And the name Rebecca literally means to tie, bind, or join. Both of these characters are also known very well for never being violent to anyone or having a massive story arc about being non-violent. Rebecca, obviously, is infamous in the Colosseum, always making sure that she never actually wins by hurting someone. In the book, Dorothy can't even muster up the courage to actually attack the Wicked Witch of the West, ending up becoming her slave and allowing all of her friends to be captured by her. And Dorothy only beats the Wicked Witch of the West by an accident. She throws water on her, and that just happens to be her weakness. Rebecca also struggles holding back her violence during the fight with Diamante before Kyros adamantly tells her to not kill anyone because it would preserve her mother's innocence. I would say innocence is actually the best word to describe both of these characters because even though their worlds that they're stuck in are so crazy, they somehow manage to come out unscathed. But now that we're done talking about Rebecca, let's go right into Kyros, her father, and who I think he'll be, the Tin Man. And yes, there is more to this than him literally being a Tin Man. Without a doubt in my mind, Kyros is one of the most underrated characters of One Piece. He has everything going for him. Great action, great mystery, a really good backstory, and really emotional moments, especially the end of the arc. But a lot of people don't really give him the credit he deserves, and I think that's a bit crazy, since when I looked at him from this perspective, he became an even better character in my opinion. So the film version basically completely gets rid of the reason why the Tin Man is the Tin Man, which I think adds a lot to the reason why I think he's just like Kyros. So I thought the best way of going about this would be for me to literally tell you the Tin Man story, and you get to see some cool pictures as well from the comic that I've been showing. Before the events of the actual story, the Tin Man and a Munchkin girl were in love. Unfortunately though, the Munchkin girl's mother very much did not want her to get married, and actually paid the Wicked Witch of the East, the one that Dorothy ended up killing, to ensure that the Tin Man wouldn't be able to build a house for the two of them. The witch enchants the axe that the Tin Man used, and almost perfectly, one leg is the first thing that gets cut off, very similar to Kyros. However, the Tin Man perseveres, becoming just more and more tin as he continues to get chopped up more and more by this enchanted axe. leading to him being eventually completely tin. However, there's one huge problem. Now that he has become completely tin, he doesn't have a heart and doesn't feel the feelings that he had for this woman he's in love with. So he wants to go to the wizard to actually see if he can regain these feelings of love and happiness. Now this obviously reminds me of Kyros because both the characters are tin men achieving to have some semblance of humanity return to them. However, the tragic part in Kyros' case is that everyone forgot about him because he was turned into a toy. The Tin Man is even more tragic, saying he's not even sure if this girl will actually be in love with him at the end of the story. Kyros obviously wants to isolate himself even more from Rebecca, worrying that he will put her in danger because of all the terrible things he's done in the past. So, both the characters are very tragic figures, caring about people very deeply, but knowing that if they return to them, they might not be able to give them the love they deserve. So, they would rather isolate themselves instead. Now, here's where the main difference occurs. In DressrOZa, Kyros and Rebecca obviously reconvene and become a happy family like they always wanted to. But in The Wizard of Oz, the Tin Man actually never returns to this girl, which is kind of crazy. Like, he actually just leaves and he actually becomes the leader of an entire nation in Oz, which is crazy. But we'll get into the actual geography of DressrOZa and Oz and how that matters later on in this video. I generally think these two have the tightest connections to one another. Both of them are noble men who care significantly about their loved ones, are turned into metal soldiers, and have sacrificed parts of their physical form in order to achieve their goals. I know that might have been a lot because the Tin Man is significantly different than what he is in the actual film, but I thought that going into his character in depth was much more important since it's so drastically different from the actual film. But now, let's get into who I think is going to be the Scarecrow, Leo. The Tontadas were sentenced to work as slaves by the original Don Quixote kings of DressrOZa, and Doflamingo continued this tyranny when he took control of DressrOZa again, forcing the Tontadas to be farmers in a smile factory. Now, the comparison between the Tontadas and the Munchkins are as clear as day, with both being a mystical race we are first introduced to when our heroes arrive. However, the focus is on Leo specifically, being similar to the Scarecrow, so I'll be focusing on that point exclusively. Outside of being a literal scarecrow on a farm, the Scarecrow focuses on his lack of intellect and inferiority to others, issues that many farmers were facing in the media in the 1800s. Although he is seen as very intelligent and competent throughout the book, he still looks down on himself. This is very similar to how the Tontada tribe views Usaland and Robbieland as their saviors because they have been beaten down so badly by Doflamingo's tyranny. They have been wanting to rise up against this man for years, but needed a guiding force along their way, which only happens once the Straw Hats arrive. Leo is incredibly gullible, like every other member of the Tontada tribe, but he's depicted as even more gullible than any other member of his group. This all results from his obliviousness towards the princess's feelings towards him. This harkens to the Scarecrow's lack of intellect, more so meaning that he just doesn't understand normal social cues, like sarcasm, and how people's emotions change from person to person. To further the parallel, Leo is also in possession of the Stitch Stitch fruit, and uses it to ensure the safety of others in many daring ways, even taking down many of Doflamingo's highest-ranking agents. The Scarecrow only realizes his true potential once he is given a bunch of needles in his head as well, and finally feeling as though he has a sharp mind, he becomes the king of the Emerald City itself. After the events of DressrOZa, Leo also becomes the leader of his own group, the Tontada Pirates, and a valued member of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, as well as one of the protectors of the Riku royal family. This feeling of inferiority that the Tontadas had at the start of the story has vanished thanks to Luffy's actions, and they are now a welcome part of DressrOZa rather than being forced in the shadows. Both of these characters have heavy themes around stitching, believing in oneself, and realizing the powers of one's intellect. Although I was a bit skeptical of this connection at the start, since the Tontadas seemed a bit too out there, I definitely see the connection, as Leo is one of the most pivotal characters we meet at the start of the DressrOZa arc. I would say that the most confusing of the four connections would have to be Bartolomeo and the Cowardly Lion. You might not think that there's that much connecting the two besides their animalistic complexion, but they actually have the same character arc. Bartolomeo acts very arrogantly in his first appearance, and is revealed to have a barrier ability, keeping him safe from harm, which again might allude to the Cowardly Lion if it was seen as someone who is more scared and meek. However, when Bartolomeo realizes that Luffy is actually on DressrOZa, this intimidating facade that he puts up in the Coliseum disappears completely, and he becomes the obsessed fanboy that we all love so much. Once Bartolomeo realizes his hero is on the island, his insecurities come to light as well. Bartolomeo was inspired by Luffy and wants to see him become the Pirate King, more than anything else in the world. However, Bartolomeo feels like he isn't even worth helping someone like Luffy, constantly putting him on a pedestal rather than seeing him as an equal. Even during his fight with Gladius, Bartolomeo isn't even sure he'll be able to defeat him on his own. So the only way he's able to do so is to muster up the courage to act like this person that's inspired him for such a long time. Now, the Cowardly Lion actually has a very similar entrance to the story as Bartolomeo. The Cowardly Lion is very intimidating, trying to attack both the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and then Toto trying to get some food. But Dorothy slaps him away, telling him, "Don't mess with my dog," and then he starts crying, showing that this was all a facade. And I know people might say this goes against the claim I made earlier about Dorothy being non-violent, but slapping someone's a lot different than killing someone. They're meant to be very villainous, and then basically instantly our perception of them does a complete 180, and they're seen as super adorable and charming. In reality, both these characters are incredibly brave, yet they put themselves in a state of mind where they could constantly be better. The lion obviously learns from the wizard that he has the bravery inside of him this entire time. But Bartolomeo actually learns that from the best person he could possibly learn it from, Luffy. But I'll get more into why I think Luffy's important later on in the story, because obviously Luffy's important to this arc. But first, let's talk about why I think Doflamingo is the Wizard of Oz. In this section, I'll also start going into the actual geography of DressrOZa, seeing as Doflamingo is able to manipulate it any way he wants. I'm also going to talk about the way that DressrOZa is presented at a face level, which is very important obviously in this arc. Let's get some obvious ones out of the way right now. They're both rulers that have overseen massive changes in their nations, both people that have usurped the previous rulers of that land, both people that constantly lie to all their followers, both people that are seen as massive beacons of hope for their respective lands. But now let's get into more specifics that I thought were very fascinating. Doflamingo always wears these sunglasses. Even in the SBS's, when Oda tries to make Doflamingo take off his sunglasses, he's still wearing sunglasses. When Oz actually arrives to this new world, so green and beautiful, he forces every single other person to wear green sunglasses in order for them to see the city the way he did. Both Doflamingo and Oz try to make these places seem as beautiful as possible, but in Doflamingo's case, it's only beautiful because it's hiding an evil secret. Both of these characters are able to make people see the world from a different perspective, which is essential when you're hiding the truth from your citizens. And for the most on-the-nose connection yet, the Wizard of Oz claims to be a ventriloquist before traveling to the New World, and Doflamingo has a string ability. Fittingly, both of these rulers have a habit of using puppets. With all this involved, the most important thing I want you to get from this is the fact that Doflamingo and the Wizard of Oz both realize... Hello. Check chapter 794, huh? Sure, okay. So you're telling me that Oda, in one of the final chapters of DressrOZa, does a cover page of a flamingo pretending to be Doflamingo, puppeteering not just any strange characters, but the exact ones that are filling this arc with references to them and their folklore. Like, the arc isn't even over, there's no puppeteering in the prompt, there's no Wizard of Oz in the prompt. Like, Oda, are you driving me crazy? But you know what's crazier than that? The fact that you're not subscribed to the channel, even though you've been watching this video for 13 minutes. Even Doflamingo isn't that crazy. Speaking of, the main thing I want you to take away from this is the difference between the two of these men. While the Wizard of Oz genuinely wants to help people by giving them advice, yet lacks the capability to do so, Doflamingo wants to manipulate people into following his will by showing off his powers, while he in turn does nothing to help them. A Wicked Witch type character under the guise of a benevolent wizard. A perfect fit for someone named the Heavenly Demon. Now, since I'm claiming that DressrOZa is actually inspired by the Wizard of Oz, one of the biggest fan theories going around could be answered right here. Is the Emerald City actually on DressrOZa? Or is it an island just a bit to the north of it? Greenbit is an Emerald City, but not really representative of what it means to be the Emerald City. Sure, the island is connected to DressrOZa and is covered with gorgeous greenery. Sure, the island was visited by Nolan, who was associated with the City of Gold, which was first mentioned in the Skypiea saga along with the Emerald City. And sure, Bellamy even returns this arc and now believes in dreams in the same arc, meaning that he might believe in the Emerald City as well. There's a lot alluding to the idea that the Emerald City is Greenbit, and it very well might be. But in all regards, the real Emerald City isn't even on the surface of DressrOZa. It's the horrors that lie underneath the surface that truly resemble the Emerald City the most. In this section, I'm going to be talking a lot about not only the plot of DressrOZa, but a big geography lesson, so get ready. I just wanted to give this a different section marker, just letting you know that here's where things are really going to start getting in-depth. Underneath the Kurita Coliseum and the Royal Palace is the real Emerald City, the horrific factory and shipyard where Doflamingo rules from. Before Pika starts terraforming the nation, they are in the exact center of DressrOZa, just like how the Emerald City is the epicenter of Oz. Doflamingo being settled here allows him to oversee everything that goes on in DressrOZa. Fittingly so, the Colosseum is what brings all these gladiators to the country, with Doflamingo playing up his role as the wizard by offering the Mera Mera no Mi. The temptation is too great to pass up. However, all the people that lose in this Colosseum are turned into toy slaves and forced to work directly underneath where they just fought. Now, I'm really excited to get into this toy aspect because it has some insane ties to the Wizard of Oz. The movie has Dorothy head right home after she discovers the truth of the wizard, but in the book, she goes on another short journey to meet the Good Witch of the South. The first place that our heroes go to outside of the Emerald City is a place called Chinatown, a town where all the people and buildings are made of literal china. One of the people from this town talks about the horrors of leaving, saying that they wouldn't be able to move anymore. This reminded me a ton of the toy people from DressrOZa, since they are only deemed as toys and nothing more, which would be the exact same position that these people would be put in. They aren't deemed as people anymore, only decorations. It's a horrifying thought, and one that I can definitely see Oda giving to a monster like Doflamingo with the creation of Sugar and the Hobby Hobby no Mi ability. One of the most distinct landmarks in DressrOZa is Flower Hill, which gets terraformed to surround the new location of Doflamingo's palace. This is highly reminiscent of the poppy field that the quartet goes through in The Wizard of Oz, which leads directly to the Emerald City in the film. Surrounding Doflamingo's palace, there were only 4 towns named, which is the exact setup of the Land of Oz. 4 lands to the north, south, east, and west, with the Emerald City in the center. Doflamingo's palace is also surrounded by an immense barrier, which is also identical to the Emerald City being surrounded by a large gate. And now here's the crazy part. This map that I've been showing you this entire time is just a small portion of the world of Oz, just like how DressrOZa is a small portion of the One Piece world. This is the Oz that we've known in the cultural zeitgeist, but this is the real Land of Oz. As you can see, around the Land of Oz there is an impassable desert in which nobody is able to travel through or else you'll die. Doflamingo, with the use of the birdcage, essentially creates this impassable desert in DressrOZa itself, causing everything surrounding his location to slowly get turned into nothing. However, there are ways to get around this desert, like tunnels connecting the land to the rest of the world, which is again seen in DressrOZa, with Doflamingo's factory below the surface. Had the factory not been destroyed by Usopp prior to this birdcage, Doflamingo would have been able to keep his business in check and start fresh with a demolished DressrOZa. And even if you don't believe that the birdcage is meant to represent the impassable desert, there's a much more obvious option as well. The One Piece Sea is one of the most treacherous places in the entire world, especially so in the new world where DressrOZa resides. The characters, motivations, settings, and plot all have connections to the Wizard of Oz, but how exactly do the characters achieve their goals at the end of the story? Simple. They do it just like how they do in the Wizard of Oz. They do it themselves, rather than being handed something by someone else. Now, I'm not sure how many of you saw this coming because I mentioned Luffy earlier when I talked about Bartolomeo and Rebecca, but now we're getting into why I think that Luffy is the best example of the wizard type character in this arc. Luffy has always said that he wants to surpass the villains that he defeats, so of course, in this aspect, he absolutely surpasses Doflamingo in his role as the wizard. The Wizard of Oz is essentially a scam artist, not having any actual grand powers, and giving people placebo effect goodies to ensure that they believe in themselves. While Doflamingo would present empty offers like he did with Bellamy, Luffy would actually genuinely try to help these people and care about them. And he does this especially well with the 4 characters I think represent the Oz Quartet. He helps Rebecca get to her father so they can live together happily like they both want to, but only after she says it's what she wants. He further helps inspire the Tontadas to rise up against Doflamingo and return to their lives of freedom. The Tontadas were the ones that inspired Luffy to help them, meaning he is helping them achieve their goal, not the other way around. And he especially helps Bartolomeo by showing him that he cares about him not as an underling, but as a friend, something Bartolomeo has wanted ever since he saw Luffy all the way back in Town. Luffy pushes all of these characters to live their best lives while he takes down the man that tries to manipulate them to his will. As corny as it may sound, Luffy shows them that they were capable of achieving their goals through their own determination rather than needing something extra. Now, there's one last question I want to bring up before ending off this video. If Greenbit isn't the Emerald City, where is the Emerald City? I've always assumed that Laugh Tale itself would have the Emerald City on it. It makes perfect sense that the mystical city where all one's dreams can come true would be the location of the One Piece. But a new theory going around is that God Valley is actually the Emerald City, which would mean that it was wiped off the map by Emu decades ago. I think this is a pretty cool concept, since it would emphasize the connection to Shandora, with both the lands seemingly being lost and impossible to find. If you want to see a theory around this topic, check out the card above to see one from Marshall D. Preach. While I don't agree with all the reasoning he gives to the theory, I think the idea of God Valley being the Emerald City in itself is a really novel concept, and I'm curious to see where that will go. If Greenbit is really meant to represent the Emerald City, that's totally fine by me. As I've shown in this video, DressrOZa has many allusions to the Wizard of Oz, so I don't really see a problem if the Emerald City doesn't show up again in the narrative. But if there is an Emerald City the Straw Hats learn about or visit later down the line, possibly like the adventure they had on Skypiea, I would be overjoyed. And who knows, maybe we'll get another great arc filled to the brim with even more Wizard of Oz references. Before I wrap up the rest of this video, I just want to say two things. Thank you incredibly so much for anyone who's found this channel or supported the channel from the Vegapunk video. At this point, we're already at 5,000 views on the theory, and it seems like it's going to go to 6,000 by the time that this is done and uploaded, which is just crazy, really crazy. You know, I've wanted this theory to be sort of big in the community for a while, and it might get to this point, which is just really cool, and I'm really happy for it. But more importantly, if there's anything about this analysis video comparing DressrOZa to the Wizard of Oz that got you really interested in the Wizard of Oz, I would absolutely recommend you check these things out. Years ago when I was at a bookstore, there were some really cool collections of the Wizard of Oz. This is the first 5 books. Unfortunately, I was not able to get my hands on the 6 to 10 collection. I haven't seen them around for a really long time, but if you can somehow manage to get your hands on some of these, I would definitely give them a shot because they're really short, they're really just fun and creative, and the drawings are actually pretty frequent. You know, it's oftentimes full page stuff, and each of the chapters starts with a drawing as well. It's really cool, and just I like the art style a lot. I would definitely recommend looking into them if you have the chance. One of my favorite comic artists, Scotty Young, actually completely redid the first 6 Oz novels into comic books, and they look really great. I absolutely adore Scotty Young's art style. I would definitely recommend checking them out as well if you're more of a fan of manga and comics and want to experience this world in a somewhat similar way. Obviously, you won't get all of the stories because it's only the first 6, but you'll get a lot, so I would definitely recommend it. You can obviously get versions of the Wizard of Oz without the original art style, but I think it kind of loses a lot of the charm that made it so appealing because of how wacky and weird everything looks with this really distinct art style. I kind of think a lot of the newer ones look a bit like Roald Dahl imitation art styles, and they just don't feel the same. That might sound a bit pretentious because obviously you can read them and get them much cheaper, but it's a lot of the appeal is gone in my opinion without the original artist's vision. There's also a lot of TV shows, plays like Wicked, a lot of stuff to immerse yourself in this world if you find it interesting. And with that, hopefully you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed making it, so I don't really mind. If you enjoyed this video, consider supporting the channel. I do theories, analysis, chapter reactions, and some other stuff for other series that aren't One Piece if you like that as well. And with that, take care and have a good one.